What is happening in the aftermath of the deadly earthquakes in Turkey and Syria. The Syrian government has approved the delivery of humanitarian aid to areas outside of its control in the quake-hit, rebel-held northwestern part of the country. The statement from the cabinet, however, has said that the aid distribution should be supervised by the International Committee of the Red Cross and the Syrian Red Crescent with the help of the United Nations. The earthquake, in which more than 24,000 lives have already been lost and counting across Turkey and Syria, is one of the worst disasters in over a century. Some 4 million people in the rebel-held northwestern part of the country rely on humanitarian aid. The Syrian government had earlier appealed for the United Nations aid while saying that all assistance must be done in coordination with Damascus and delivered from within Syria and not from across the Turkish border into the rebel areas. The United Nations has been delivering aid to rebel-held areas either from neighbouring Turkey through the Bab al-Hawa crossing or directly across the front line from the government-held areas. The United Nations Chief Antonio Guterres had also urged the Security Council to authorise the opening of additional crossings on the Turkey-Syria border for the delivery of United Nations aid to quake victims in rebel areas. Currently, just one crossing on the border is open to the United Nations aid deliveries, and members of the Kurdistan Workers' Party group have also announced a temporary halt in fighting to ease recovery work in the wake of the massive earthquake. The United Nations Rights Chief has also called for an immediate ceasefire in Syria to facilitate the delivery of aid to all victims of the earthquake. And according to a Swiss envoy, the United Nations Security Council will be meeting in Syria sometime next week to hear from the United Nations Under-Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, who is visiting Turkey and Syria this weekend. More than 3,000 people have died in parts of Syria in the devastating earthquake, and according to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, an estimated 5.37 million people will need shelter assistance across the country. So this, of course, is the situation at this moment in Turkey and Syria. Remember, in Syria, because of the politics and because of the sanctions which have been imposed on the country by the West, the delivery of aid has been made that much more complicated. At this moment, the death toll in the aftermath of this earthquake has now gone up over 24,000. Keep in mind, when we say 24,000 is the death toll at this moment, these are the bodies that have been pulled out of the people who have been trapped underneath the rubble who have died. Rescue and relief work is still presently on, but with each passing hour, the hope of finding survivors diminishes. The 72-hour period was said to be the golden period, and that has now clearly elapsed. And it is the extreme cold conditions which have also complicated the search for the people who are trapped. It's being said that many people who are trapped underneath the rubble in the aftermath of the earthquake would have died of hypothermia because of the extreme cold weather conditions. They literally would have frozen to their deaths underneath the rubble as they waited for help to come. This is what the scene looks like. More than 5.3 million people at this point of time are estimated to be rendered homeless in the aftermath of these earthquakes. And these are some heartbreaking scenes that are coming in from Turkey and Syria, and especially in Syria, the politics, of course, has made the delivery of aid that much more complicated. And my colleague Ghadi Francis is tracking the developments for us from the ground. She's joining us from Syria at this point of time. Ghadi, if you can hear me, this of course is a tragic moment in Syria. In the aftermath of the earthquake, there are thousands of people who've lost their lives. But getting aid and also getting the relief material for people within Syria has been made that much more complicated in Syria. But first, tell us what the situation is like and what is happening at this moment in terms of the relief and the rescue efforts that are presently underway.
Good morning from the middle of Damascus, the capital of Syria. It has been a tough road from Lebanon to Syria last night, as countless people, trains, trucks, relief, help, has been flowing or trying to start to flow from Lebanon via the borders with Syria. It took us around 5 to 6 hours to get to Damascus last night with freezing conditions, cold conditions. I could only imagine people under the rubble now with war, earthquake, and also very hard weather conditions. Right now, we will commence our tour exclusively for WION from these cities in Syria where nobody has been reporting. No global television, no global eye has come to see what is happening on the ground of Damascus, on the ground of Jabli, Latakia, Hama, Homs, and Aleppo. These parts of Syria have been darkened for years, for over a decade of war. Little or no media has come here to see these people. Right now, under the sanctions, the slow and very slow process of rescue was really sad for people here. It added to the disaster that they have been through. Because of the sanctions, the political sanctions, many people remained under the rubble for days and days, alive, but nobody could come to the rescue. Just last night, 5 days later than staying under the rubble in a city called Jabli, which we will later report from, a family, a mother and her daughter were saved. 5 days later, imagine. And it was only a Lebanese volunteer from the Lebanese team that could come through the borders. This was crippled and slowed down by the unilateral sanctions on Syria. And yet again, in the past 24 hours, the U.S. Treasury lifted or paused some of these sanctions for 180 days because of the actual devastating, horrible scenes that we are seeing on the ground. Right here in the capital of Damascus, I am in the center of this capital. There is no damage here, but it is the central center for relief. As we all know, it is the capital. It has the biggest airport, and it has the means necessary to be able to optimize and operate the relief system. Although there is sanctions on Syria, many Arab nations and many nations, including India, Italy, the United Arab Emirates, Lebanon, of course, Algeria, and Iraq, with non-stop support, some of these nations were able to help. But now that these sanctions have been slightly paused, people are expecting more. You know, giving money from outside Syria is almost impossible, and this is a problem. Also, getting medicine is bad. Now we will move into the centers where the relief is being optimized. Churches, mosques, schools, every center that there is, every public center that there is has been now turned into a relief support system and an operation system. Many of the NGOs, many of the volunteers are doing that.
Absolutely. Now, Ghadi, tell us a bit about, the very complex politics of Syria, because there are parts of Syria which are under the control of the rebels, and these are said to be pretty badly affected in the earthquake. So how is aid actually being channeled to those regions, which are not directly under the control of Damascus, but are under the control of rebels? And the politics of, of who is in charge and through whom the aid will be funneled is what has made the situation in Syria that much more complicated.
Well, this is the question of the century, dear. Because in a country that has been over a decade into war, not every city is under the control of the same forces. Some armed groups in northern Syria, where there is no state, there's no Syrian state, have their own affiliations and their own ways, and they get their help from the parts that are not under the Syrian state. They get their help via the Turkish border, and there has been a lot reported there about misuse or abuse of the calamity by certain armed groups that are affiliated with, some of them are even linked as terrorist groups, and some of them are linked with the Americans. This chaos, this execution chaos has resulted in a lot of stories coming that the help that is coming through Turkey has been sold or taken or whatever. Also on this side of Syria, which is the basic main big side, that includes southern Syria from Golan Heights until Aleppo and the Iraqi borders, and also the coastal part. This Syria, the greater part of Syria, is under the Syrian state, the Syrian army, the regulation of the Syrian government. And this government is sanctioned, has unilateral sanctions. So it is not allowed to take money. The banks are closed. There's no banking system at all. And most of the nations around the world, including the EU and the United States, don't want to normalize ties with this government. So this has been the dilemma. But in spite of that, people who are living under the roofs in these cities, Latakia, Hama, Homs, and Aleppo, regardless if it is under the government or the rebels, they are stuck under the roofs and nobody could come and help. This is the dilemma, both ways, because there's no central control for what is happening. But now it is slowly becoming better, but after 5-6 days have passed, and time is of the essence.
Thank you very much indeed, Ghadi Francis, for joining us from Damascus and getting us all those insights. We'll of course come back to you. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.